root of suffering is attachment or clinging. When we cling to things because they're impermanent, we try to make them permanent, or we try to make them our own. The problem with that becomes is that the world is ever changing. So we're not actually able to fully experience life as it is if we're continuously trying to attach to things, if we're continuously trying to bring our identity to whatever it is that we own or whoever it is that we're associated with or whatever role we seem to be playing at that period of time in our lives. Now, the interesting thing about this is we were talking about this concept of limited identity in the previous episode. And limited identity comes from a limiting set of beliefs about yourself and about the world. And one thing that starts to create limited identity is this idea that we can accumulate resources, we can accumulate material goods and wealth, and when we start to attach ourselves or try to define ourselves by that material gain or the things that we've accumulated, we start to limit our identity. And this is a really important concept because as we limit our identity, we're attaching identity to things that are impermanent, fragile, or things that can be taken away from us. And that is one of the problems of clinging to identity. I remember once when I was like 18 years old, I had been spending a lot of time with my family because I had moved to Canada, and they have done very well for themselves in a material sense, right? They've done very well with their business. They had built some wealth, and I was part of this, but I always remember myself never being able to fully feel me around them. And one of the reasons is a lot of the validation that they would give themselves, like the self-validating principles that they would hold for themselves, were based on their material wealth and their accomplishments and their success. So I remember when I was 18 years old, I had watched the movie Fight Club for the first time in my life. And, one of my best friend, he actually showed me the movie, and he's actually here on the podcast. He's doing the behind the scenes little editing here. But he had showed me the movie, and one of the lines in the movie that riveted me was this idea of the things you own end up owning you. And so when I had heard that, and I'd been around my family who basically linked their own intelligence to their material success at the time, I remember for myself, I felt so strongly to never be that way, to never be caught in that. And I didn't know anything about Zen or about Buddhism or Stoicism for that matter at that point in my life. But what I did know is that I could see what it turned people into to start to attach themselves in that way. So I'd gotten a tattoo that I have on my ribs that says, the things you own do not define who you are. And one of the reasons I get that is because no matter what you accumulate in your life, you can have things that are yours, but none of those things could ever be you. And so removing yourself and not clinging to that, not attaching to that, will really help with the whole idea of suffering and help with the ever-changing terrain of life, the ever-changing circumstances, and putting your focus into things that you can control rather than the things that you can't. We can't control what's going to happen to our personal property day to day. And sometimes that even includes our body. We can't control what's going to happen in our body. Sometimes we can get sick, we can get hurt. So the less we identify with the things that we own, the physical, the easier a time we're going to have with kind of allowing ourselves to embrace life as it is, to view life as it is, and to have the experience of life without trying to grab onto things. There's a great Zen proverb that says, let go or be dragged. And I believe it was Lao Tzu that said that. And let go or be dragged really speaks to the impermanence of life and how every time we attach to it, we end up creating more suffering for ourselves. Now, the third noble truth is the truth that suffering can be let go. And it is the truth of nirvana. Now, nirvana, the literal translation of nirvana is to exhale, to blow out. And when we think about this, if you try to hold your breath without exhaling, you end up losing your breath. If you take nothing in, you also don't breathe. And as a human being, you need to breathe in order to live, right? It's a pretty obvious concept. But the truth of nirvana is this idea of letting go of these attachments, letting go of all the things that are not you. And in Stoicism, what's talked about by the philosopher Seneca is to allow philosophy to scrape off your faults rather than rail against the faults of others. So in using your philosophy to scrape off the parts of yourself that are not you, the things that you had maybe previously clinged to, the things that you can't control, or the things that don't actually belong to you, that allows us to break away from this attachment, which is a really key idea when it comes to practicing your philosophy. So we use that truth of nirvana to blow out, to let go of the things that are not ourselves. And this is key because we want to make sure that every time we start to attach ourselves to things, It is part of the human experience. It's not about beating yourself up for attaching to something, but it's realizing when you do have an attachment and allowing your philosophy, your sense of self-reflection, or even your meditation to help you to scrape that off of yourself, to realize that it's not you, and to not lose your breath by trying to hold on to it and cling to it.